Hi everyone, I'm Alexandra from the Florentine, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Frances Mays. Hello.
Alexandra, great to be here. It's night your time. It's still morning here in North Carolina.
Well, it's still bright and beautiful, but when we started these chats almost 2 months ago, we picked 5 p.m. as that was kind of the end of the day. TF Together has been, in fact, our way to stay together through these past 2 months of lockdown and bring a little bit of Florence and Tuscany into people's homes.
Always a good idea.
And so we wanted to bring you, of course, because who better to embody Italy and embody Tuscany but you. So I know you usually spend spring at your villa in Cortona at Bramasole, but you're not there right now. Tell us where you are.
No, I'm in North Carolina, and I was looking at my agenda this morning. All the things I had planned for the end of May in Italy are now just crossed out. But as they say, when life gives you lemons, make limoncello. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Absolutely.
I always have a wonderful vegetable and herb garden in the summer in Italy. So I'm trying to reproduce that here. I've been working outside quite a bit. And that's a very good thing to do, just to be out in nature. And I'm missing every day Italy and can't wait to get back.
I bet. I mean, and also you're a traveler at heart, and being locked up, even if you can't get out to your beautiful rose garden, we've seen the roses on Instagram. I mean, it must be really tough. How did you get that travel bug? How did you end up being such a traveler?
I grew up way south in Georgia, Fitzgerald. It's a town about as big as my desk here. And my mother was always wanting to travel. My father used to say our family motto should be packing and unpacking. At that time, we didn't go very far. We went over to the coast or sometimes to the mountains in North Carolina. That was about it. But I think I got the travel bug from my mother. And I studied a lot of art history in college, and I took these classes: Renaissance art, Renaissance architecture, medieval art, medieval architecture, and I could not wait to take the first thing smoking on the runway after studying Italian art to get there. So that was the first country I ever had a really big passion to see. So I got there to see what I had studied. That was my main reason for going. But then when I got there, I was in Bologna first and sitting out under those beautiful arcades. Everyone was having coffee and laughing and smoking. And I said to my husband, these people are having more fun than we are. So that was kind of a big revelation. And ever since then, I've gone to Italy any possible time I can. I have passion to see the rest of the world too, so I do other traveling, but it's always Italy for me. It's kind of heart's needle. It's the place I have lived longer than any place in my whole life. So it's home, and it's particularly odd to be exiled from the place you consider home.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that was a slip of the tongue or if that was a purposeful insertion of the title of your book, Always Italy. Can you show us the tone?
That was a slip, but it is always Italy for me. It's a country that will never, ever exhaust my interests. I've been a million times, and I hope to go a million more. And I know that even if I had 5 more lifetimes to live, I could never get to the bottom of Italy.
So when you were sitting in a cafe or in a bar in Bologna and other people were having more fun, how did you how did you learn to have fun the way they did?
Well, I always did have fun. It was just that I responded so much to this kind of vivacity of Italian life. And in a way, it reminded me, a strange way, of where I grew up in a small southern town where there's such an intense sense of hospitality and welcoming of the stranger in the small town where I grew up. And the minute I bought my house and I started spending a lot of time there, I saw a lot more kind of parallels between the American South and Italy. Not only the intense heat in the summer, but not only things like people selling watermelons on the side of the road, but just that hospitality, that the sense of the immediacy of life and that it's meant to be lived. And I think that is one of the things I admire most about Italians, if one can generalize, is that up front in their lives, there's a kind of sense that life is for today. And there's a sense of, I think, kind of inbred spontaneity still in Italian life that I really respond to. And it's partly that it resonates with me from a time way in the past where I grew up in a similar kind of ambience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In fact, and so I know you've written a memoir about growing up in the South, and your most famous book is Under the Tuscan Sun. So we obviously are associating you primarily with Tuscany, but of course this book is about all of Italy. So always Italy. Let's see the tome again, because we got just a quick look at it, but it's so big and heavy and lavishly illustrated.
I think it is. It's like a chemistry textbook, but prettier.
Yes. So this is Always Italy. Just came out.
It's the first book I've done that's had this many photographs in it, because I worked with Ondine Cohen, who lives in Pienza,
Mm-hmm.
and we were published this book with National Geographic. So everybody remembers National Geographic for its photographs. So that was just a pleasure to be able to do a kind of different book. Most of my books are memoir in tone. I've done a couple of photo texts, but this was, it was really a whole different kind of project, because the blending of someone else's voice, my voice, and the photos that are included, I think just made a kind of exciting, different new project for me.
Mm-hmm. So how is, I have a copy of this other book, not illustrated, but I guess this is one of the first times that you tackled all of Italy, or almost all of Italy. How are the two books different?
Yes, this is kind of a precursor in a way, because I was down in Puglia and with my husband, and we were loving the sense of discovery in the out of the way places in Puglia. It was partly because we kept getting lost. This was 4 or 5 years ago, and the GPS on our rented car wasn't that great. It kept taking us through farmers' olive groves and things like that. But we loved that sense of discovery, and we were going to all the hot spots in Puglia, Lecce, Ostunia, etc., but finding these incredibly small towns where there was a medieval bread oven or a particular kind of pasta, a little farmer's market where I discovered a recipe for cooking hyacinth bulbs. And this kind of out of the way discovery restored a sense of adventurous travel to me. Not adventurous in the sense of, being dangerous or taking huge risks, but just finding new joy in out of the way places. So we were down in Puglia, and I said, what if we just kept on doing this? Why don't we just keep traveling like this? So see you in the piazza, new places to discover in Italy, all kinds of out of the way places. And I had the idea after that, because I had so much enjoyed all of these out of the way places, that I really wanted to see every region of Italy, all of Italy. So Always Italy is all 20 regions, and very few Italians have been to all 20 regions. So I feel like I want a merit badge,
Absolutely.
Have I seen Italy?
Being
No.
Molise.
Yes, exactly. Basilicata everywhere. But I haven't seen Italy. I think there's plenty left for the rest of my life, or if I'm reincarnated as an Italian, to see a whole lot more. It was really amazing to visit the places that I had put off because I didn't really ever have much of a desire to go to, say, Calabria. I knew it had beautiful beaches, but I got to Calabria, and as my Tuscan neighbor said, un altro mondo, it's another world. And it is, and that is kind of what I found out about all of the regions. Each one is its own world. It has its own dialect, its dialects, wines, extremely particular to the area, different pastas, different artists, different archaeological sites, different art, everything. And I kept thinking, why is Italy, which is so small as a country, it's roughly the size of Arizona, which I don't think of as an immense state, but I think of Italy as an immense country. It's so diverse from the, tip-top Dolomite Mountain down to the toe of Sicily. I mean, the southernmost point of Sicily. It's 20 different worlds, and each one you could spend a whole lot more time than I have in each one. Like Calabria, for instance, I can't wait to go back. Friuli, I love Friuli. I could live there. I found so many towns, particularly in the Trentino Alto Adige area. I could move there tomorrow, pack up. I felt very disloyal to my choice of Tuscany because I fell in love with so many other places. But in the end, I came back, and the end of the book, and See You in the Piazza, is kind of a rediscovery of Tuscany itself. But diverse, it is just, don't you find it living there that you never can quite grasp that it can be that different from place to place?
Absolutely. I mean, it's what they say about travel is the best thing is coming home. And of course, if home is in Tuscany, you really can't get any better than that. But it's always special. And I think every time we go away for a moment and then we give ourselves back to that space, we do have a new experience. So the other day, we were talking and I said, gee, I'm thinking of going downtown. I don't know. I live out in the suburbs of Florence, and I decided I would finally, after these 2 months of reclusion, go and take some first intrepid steps downtown. And you said, I'd like to do that and just see how it changes my perception of things. And so I went down with my antenna really up, and I think it was like having a confirmation ceremony with the city that I chose 20 years ago. And every time I see it like that, it's like seeing it. It was really like having new eyes and coming back to a place that I love so much. So Italy.
I saw your photographs. They were wonderful on your art trav and on the Florentine site. They were really wonderful.
Oh, so
and I've worked with a photographer in the past, and we've been in Florence, and I'm saying, well, there's so many people. It's hard to photograph. He says, look up. That's always a good thing to do.
But then there's so many places in Italy that is not a problem. There's all those wonderful towns to be discovered, but also cities. You mentioned Genova that you really like as cities that are cities, but people don't visit them, right?
Yes, and I wonder, after this pandemic has simmered down and we're able to travel, if people won't think more of going to less crowded places.
Mm-hmm.
I have loved places like Catania. I always thought Catania, well, that's where you land when you're going to other places in Sicily. But Catania is a wonderful city. Genova, who goes to Genova? Everybody's heard of it, Christopher Columbus, etc. But Genova is medieval, marvelous, extravagant, wonderful art, all those ship-going robber barons collected from Northern Europe. It's different because most Italian museums have mostly Italian art, but up in Geneva, there's art from all over Europe. Palermo, people have fear of Palermo and Naples, and they're such incredible cities. I really love Parma. Trieste, I think, in terms of future travel, and people are, I think, planning trips now because they need something to look forward to, being locked down, and a lot of people having had the trip of a lifetime possibly canceled. They're beginning to think, when can I go and where can I go? And I would really urge looking into some of these smaller cities. I think the one that absolutely thrilled me the most was Torino, which I'd always thought, oh, Torino, it's got really great food, but it's a big industrial city. It is, in fact, the greenest city in Italy. It is just beautiful. The food, super. There's a lot of influence from, the royals, the Savoy royals, a lot of influence from France and Switzerland. And so the desserts are really good. The castles, the art, I love Torino. And I went there because of Cesare Pavese, one of my very favorite Italian writers, and Natalia Ginsburg. That was what really drew me to Torino as a literary destination. But when I got there, I fell in love. I've been back 4 or 5 times since. My grandson studied intensive Italian there last summer. We rented an apartment. We just absolutely love Torino. So out of the way places, that's one of my favorite ways to travel.
That's actually, that leads me straight into one of the questions I've been wondering, which is, what are the factors that attract you to a destination when you're researching for a trip?
I think I just want to go everywhere in Italy. I don't have any particular thing that draws me, other than I'm always interested in the art and the archaeology. A lot of people get sick of going into archaeological museums after they've been to 3 or 4, but I'm going to all of them. I love the archaeological museums. So when I see that there's one in an area, that becomes kind of a place I head for. I love the Italian beaches. There's so many. I'm looking for the literary connections, of course. I mentioned Pavese, but there's Carlo Levi. Just way down in Puglia, I was drawn to Patience Gray, who wrote Honey from a Weed. I look for that kind of thing, like D.H. Lawrence, Sea in Sardinia, Lampedusa, Sciascia. The literary connections are things that draw me, but mainly I just want to see everything. I want to see all the great piazzas, and piazza life is the best thing about Italy. Each town still has its living room and everyone gathers there. It's just such a deeply humanistic way to live. So I'm after piazza life when I'm looking for travel. I look for the great piazzas.
That's interesting. We have a number of comments from people, and just as you were speaking about literary inspiration, I was thinking that would be a great book or article, a sort of literary travel in Italy. But we also have questions. Sheila is asking, she says, if she remembers correctly, you used to teach poetry at San Francisco State University. Have you ever thought about writing a book of poetry about Italy?
Something weird happened to me when I moved to Italy. I had written 7 books of poetry, and my whole teaching career was teaching poetry. But when I got to Italy, I started keeping this blue notebook, and I kept finding that I was filling up the pages, and my lines didn't want to break, and I didn't want to stop. And I suddenly realized I'm writing prose. What's happening? And New York Times asked me to write an article on markets. And I wrote that article. It was so much fun. And long story short, I started writing prose, and I have never gone back to writing poetry. But my husband is a poet, and he writes a lot of poems about Italy. So we still read poetry all the time. He lives and breathes poetry. I just don't know how to write it anymore. I even wrote a textbook, The Discovery of Poetry, that is still in print after all these years. So poetry is really my first love, but I don't know, some rhythm in your brain controls your writing, and I don't think you always have a say in how those rhythms change. But I would love to go back to poetry, writing poetry someday. It would be a privilege.
Okay. As for Angela, she asks, because of your love for Renaissance art, would you ever write a fiction piece set in that time? Historical fiction, not something you've done.
No, I haven't. I don't know how to do that. I could think about it, but I don't really know how to do that.
That's all right. I don't know either, and I'm an art historian. But there's certainly a trick to it. That's something that some people do and some people don't.
Yes, one of the people I have met through Instagram and Facebook, Laura Morelli, writes historical fiction. She has a new book coming out I can't wait to see. I've read her earlier one about a gondola maker in Venice. I do read historical fiction sometimes, but it's not my particular cup of Brunello as a writer.
Oh, we should have had some wine, although I guess it's early for you, but it's perfect time for me. So you have this particular interest in the literary side, and then of course you're guided by a love of wine and food, and you were working with a co-author, Dean, who's an old friend, who has different interests. So what were the parts that she was more interested in doing?
Ondine's in Pienza. She's a person who's extremely interested in design and has in fact been very involved in the design and running of two wonderful hotels in Pienza, La Bendita and La Bendita Townhouse. So she's also a marathon runner, which I definitely am not. So she had a particular interest in design, artisan design, all kinds of high-end fashion design in Milan, hotel design, and also a really big interest in the outdoors. So one thing we really wanted this book to be was a book about Italy today. Not only the history and the things you must see from the past, but how Italy is as a country today, and new architecture, new chefs, new, the things that are going on right now. And since she lives right there in Pienza, she's very much with her finger on everything that's going on. So my interests are more, food, wine, art, writing, the place itself. We just really fit a wonderful symbiosis together. And I think I learned from her, she learned from me, and we made this book together. It was great.
So I've always wondered what's the process of writing a book together? How did that work out so magically well?
It was the first time for me, and it's quite different from when a book is definitely your own. I guess the major thing we had to watch out for was, were we repeating? Because naturally we are attracted to many of the same things. And so when we were putting things together, we had to really check and see if there were overlaps. And then the two of us were working with the photography team. So there were often big discussions about what pictures were best for what we had written. And it's a lot more complicated to write a book with somebody else than it is just when it's your own book. But we're really pleased with the result.
I'm looking at some of the many questions we have. A lot of people tuning in. Actually, if people let us know where they are, I'm curious to know where everyone is. I think I got a lot of people commenting from the States. We have Gloria, who actually says that was the text in my first creative writing class at Washington College. So there you go.
Good. Great.
It's absolutely still. Well, here's a nice question. What is your next destination in Italy when travel is allowed again?
In Italy, well, I spent a beautiful week near Noto in Sicily last October, and I'm dying to get back down to the south of Sicily. This town on the front of See You in the Piazza is in the south of Sicily too, and I just love that area. But I mentioned earlier Friuli. In the fall season, I would love to go back to Friuli because of the food. It's right on the border with Austria and Slovenia, and then there's Trieste also in Friuli. The food has these influences that make it like no other food in the world. And there's a lot of game, a lot of foraging, a lot of mushrooms, a lot of creativity around the very natural ingredients in that part of the world. The wine, I learned there that white wine is every bit as complex as red wine, which isn't always obvious in Italy. And I would love to go back to that area. I mean, let me go on for like 4 hours about where I would like to go back. Trento Alto Adige. I love the Adige River. It's one of my favorite rivers. And one trip I would love to take is from its headwaters all the way to where it goes into the Adriatic. I would just love to trace the Adige. I think that would be a fantastic trip. I would love to take the walk of St. Francis. There's a long trail for St. Francis's peregrinations, and he was all over the place, including in Cortona for a time, where I live. He spent a winter in a little cell at Le Celle. Mm-hmm. But I love to take some of his walks, some of those long walks. There's so many things I love to do. Always love to spend time in Florence, of course, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And just as an aside, the Florentine is such a gift to people traveling there, to pick it up and see what's going on, to get some insider information. We always look for the Florentine in Cortona too. So Thank you for providing us with that great link to that great city.
That is absolutely what the Florentine tries to do. So shout out to the whole editorial team. We're actually a very small editorial team, but hardworking one. We have a lovely quote from Debbie Markley. Italy reminds me of the quote, "Just because you've already eaten doesn't mean you can't keep looking at the menu. It's hard to find a favorite region." So that kind of explains your desire to go absolutely everywhere. And I love that. I asked where people are. We've got a ton of people. We've got New York, Maine, Montreal, Los Angeles, Ohio. Love Italy. Can't wait to get back there. Thank you, Susan. We also want you back here. We have someone from Buenos Aires in Argentina, from Karina, listening in from Smith Station, Alabama. You got Rome.
Oh, I know who that is.
That's Michelle, either Michelle or Michele West. Not sure if that's an Italian.
Michelle and Sarah, they're great artists down in Alabama.
Oh, wow. There you go. Small enough Smith Station to know exactly who that might have been, right? And then Lisa Tucci from Rome, Rena from Washington State, USA. We have Elizabeth from San Francisco. And there's just so many more I can't read. Oh, Guelph, Ontario, Canada. That's getting close to my birthplace in Toronto.
Yeah.
So lots of people, and even our editor, Marco Badiani, who is thrilled that you've said that the Florentine is a gift. So thank you also from Marco. So many things to talk about when we're talking about travel in Italy. I personally, one of the reasons that I write a blog and I contribute to the Florentine, and I get out there and I take pictures on Instagram is because it forces me to get out and travel a lot. And I'm just amazed that you have the desire to keep going out, because I think if I had Brahma Sole, I just kind of want to sit back in that garden and sit under the Tuscan sun and maybe not move. But I was also, in terms of writing as a motivator, how does writing change or condition the way that you experience a place?
Well, I have always been a big reader of writers about place. And of course, being a Southerner, that sense of place in writing is kind of spoon-fed to you along with grits and quail. So I grew up reading great writers of place, Eudora Welty, Faulkner, all the Southern writers. And so that was always to me of value in writing. Even when I wrote poetry, my poetry was often centered around place. Also a kind of quest for home, because I think there's nothing more important to an obsessed traveler who wants to be gone, gone, gone. There's nothing more important than home. So that kind of going out and coming back, going out and coming back has been one of the kind of organizing principles of my writing always, and trying to be in a place and figure out what makes this place, and no other place. What makes the people here the way they are? How does the landscape, how does the place itself shape them? Because I've always felt like where you are in a way is who you are. That is kind of the bedrock idea I have about writing about place. So when I'm traveling and I'm writing about a place, it's those things I am most interested in, to see the shaping power of the landscape. Who would you be if you lived here? What would it be like to be at home here? I wrote a book called A Year in the World, and I went to a lot of different European countries, staying in a house or an apartment or a boat or somewhere for a month, trying to see what it's like to actually live there. So that's just part of my being as a writer, is that kind of sense of place.
That's really interesting. It's lovely. I think we definitely have a privilege of being able to spend more time in this country, of having a home base and having the time to spend longer. But absolutely, whenever I go to a city, I think I like it, and then I think, could I live there? And some of them, the answer is yes.
Yes. And some, the answer is, I don't get this place, or no.
Well, it's nice to visit for a while, but then you don't want to stay. Yeah. Sheila Corwin is asking us which of your many books you feel most attached to.
I think the one that was the closest to the bone is my memoir, Under Magnolia. That caused me a lot of trouble with my family, So in a way, it's the most charged book, but I've loved writing all the books about Italy. And I think that the next book I'm going to write is a book about home, and being at home, all the things that I was talking about a few minutes ago. So I'm kind of thrashing around with that kind of idea now of what comes next. And I have kind of a new force in my life, because my grandson, my adored grandson, who's traveled with me and is in so many of my books, has, much to our surprise, elected to go to NYU Shanghai for college. So we're now kind of facing a whole world that we know nothing about. I've been to Singapore, but that's it. So that's kind of exciting when something happens in your life that you don't really have any control over, that leads you in a new direction. So we're reading a lot about China now, and we'll be going there. So I think, just following those dropped breadcrumbs through the forest can lead you into unexpected travels. There are many, many places I want to go, but Italy has been just a joy to write about, because I've always felt that if I did have those 5 other lifetimes, there would always be something new to write about.
Absolutely. Well, Pat Kirkman says she has already gone over to Amazon and ordered Always Italy while we were chatting. So she's got that. It's going to arrive on Wednesday. And we have a lot of questions about also some of your other books. Gina is asking, when you wrote Women in Sunlight, were any of the characters or their stories attached to you personally?
Oh, they all were. I got to write about these 4 women, each one of whom had one of my major interests. So cooking, gardening, writing, houses, and just each one of them kind of embodied these passions of mine. The characters were really fictional. Each one, of course, had certain, composite things from people I've known here and there. But I think that's one of the surprises of writing fiction, is that you may start off thinking you're writing about things you're interested in, but I never really believed it when writers said to me, because I'd never written much fiction, your characters take on lives of their own and they start going in their own directions. And I thought, yeah, but they do. And I became very attached to those women. And, sometimes I wake up and I think, wonder what they're doing over there in that house across the street,
Well, Kay Eller says she loved that book and wants to know when the film will be produced.
Oh, it has been optioned for a film, and someone's actually writing a screenplay right now. Of course, with an option, you never know whether it will occur, but I'm hoping it will. I've got a great production company. They were producers of Call Me By Your Name. It's called Water's Edge. And they'll be really fun to work with. And I'm already looking around for locations and piazzas that could be in the film. Under the Tuscan Sun film happened very spontaneously. Sometimes, again, that following the little things in the forest is what turns out to be so important. My agent tried to get Under the Tuscan Sun made into a film, but I actually met by chance the producer in a wine store in Pienza, and that's how the film became made, just because I happened to meet the person who asked me if I could recommend a Tuscan wine.
Wow.
So those kinds of things can happen. That was really fun.
Pienza,
and the movie
center of the world.
Yes.
So when I was going to ask you a little trade secret, not about writing, but about traveling. When you were writing Always Italy, and what's lovely about the book is it really is about new Italy. I mean, go into all the stuff that's new, the fashion and the new restaurants, the funky places, the boutique hotels, which I guess is a bit of Ondine's hand in those things, but it's also, like you said, it's a book about Italy now, so it's not a traditional guidebook. How do you discover all these special places that you then write about?
Well, going there and being super aware, get to a place, start walking. That's what I always do when I get to a new place, is take the longest walk that I can, preferably getting up really early in the morning as the town is just coming to life. Meet as many people as you can, research like crazy. And then I think mainly for me, it's just following my interest. And that's what leads me always to the discoveries I make in places. But I think, just like going in a shop or a wine store, and then you'll take a grocery store and saying to the person, if you were going out with your family for a really special dinner, where would you eat? That way you get a personal recommendation, not can you recommend a restaurant, because then you might be told a touristy place, but just kind of going around those first level tourist expectations and trying to get into the heart of a place is really important. Reading the writers of the area, of course. I'm always attuned to them because they have the news of the place, the art of the place, the architecture, wandering in little neighborhoods. Like you go to Korey and you're overwhelmed with all the people who are there. But you start walking around Korey and you realize this is one of the great places in the world to walk. It's nobody's out on these tiny little paths, and you look into all these secret little gardens and see these beautiful views of the sea from unexpected places, and just getting off the beaten track, off the expectation of where you should see into what you happen upon. For me, that's the the spontaneity of travel.
So I've got Lee Cooper who says, it's great to hear your voice, Frances, and lots of people are saying that. I moved to Tuscany in 2001. Every time I open up a bottle of Brunello, I think of you and Ed. So
That's nice.
An influencer, let's say, in Instagram terms, but it's someone who's influenced a lot of travel and a lot of people, I think, too, with this new book, especially to visit some places that are off the beaten track. So, once upon a time, Cortona was off the beaten track, and now I think that there's a lot to discover with your new book. So that's super exciting. Sheila Corwin has asked twice, so I think she really, really wants to hear a part of the book. So if you can, I don't know if this is not something we planned, but if you can pick a little paragraph or something, or if you want to show us a part of the book, I know she would love to hear
Going
that.
back for 1 second to Instagram, I love your Art Trav post, and I wanted to mention that every Friday, Ondine is doing a long Instagram post on a particular region, and she asks a question. The first person who answers the question gets a copy of the book. But I'm enjoying her posts on that. I do a lot of posts on Instagram too, so those things are really. Let's see how
I can ask. Thank you to Jane in the back end here. Jane is my colleague at the Florentine, and she's putting up all the messages and stuff, so we're not alone. Maybe Jane, if I can ask you to put up Frances's Instagram username and also Ondine Cohane's Instagram.
That would be great.
On the screen so we can get everybody also following you there, and people can also try to win a copy of the book from Ondine's posts.
That would be great. I'll just read this opening paragraph because it's short. The journeys I took for this book were exhilarating because finally I could stop at Greek ruins in Calabria, order the rustic pastas of Sardinia, stand under waterfalls in Trentino Alto Adige, watch water buffalo milk turn into mozzarella in Puglia, and hike the sublime trails of Val d'Aosta. I scoured the sites in all 20 regions. At last, I thought, I'm beginning to know this country. Still, much remains for as many future trips as I can plan.
That's lovely. With Michelle West, I'm still probably not pronouncing her name correctly, but she says that you should read all your books as audiobooks. Fantastic voice.
I have read most of my books as audiobooks. I did not read Women in Sunlight, the novel, because I have listened to a lot of novels on audio, and I just don't have the training to do all the different voices. My other books I read and enjoyed reading very much because they were all in my voice. But when you get to a novel and there's so many different voices, you have to be really trained to do a good job with that.
Rochelle is asking who your favorite Italian author is.
I have been just passionately rereading Natalia Ginsburg. She is such a great writer. I especially love her book, Family Sayings. because it's such a serious time, World War II, and the book manages to be hugely focused on that and at the same time really humorous and humane. I love her work. And I mentioned earlier Cesare Pavese. He's another quest of mine. I went all over the places he frequented in Torino, and even stayed in the B&B that is his house, his original house. Il Falò it's the moon and the bonfires. La Luna e il Falò is the name of the novel, and that's also the name of the B&B. So I got to sleep in his bedroom. He's been dead since 1950, but that didn't matter. I just loved following that literary quest up to the town where he was born. And so those are, I love Lampedusa, my goodness, Shasha. But I guess I'd say my favorite at the moment would be Ginsberg.
Okay. Have you read the My
Brilliant Friend?
Beautiful Friend. Yes, My Brilliant Friends series.
Yeah, and I've also seen the TV series. Brilliant, both.
It's lovely.
I love Naples, and I was particularly interested in that sense of place of the city of Naples. I felt that the film version really cleaned it up quite a bit. You didn't get the sense of the scruffy poverty those girls actually lived in nearly as much as you do in the book. The violence in the family, there's a little bit of that, but what a rough childhood those two girls had.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting books though, and I really like the TV series as well. So
yes, very well done.
Now we do have plenty of readers who are saying how much they can't wait to get back here, and of course we sympathize absolutely. I guess two things. One is, what can you recommend for people to do right now to feel a little closer to Italy and to Florence or to Tuscany?
Reading, absolutely. That's what I do a lot of is reading everything I can, and maybe researching a trip, planning that trip so that when you can go, you're poised to do it. Another thing, of course, which is very, very vital, is cooking. There's so many things you can tune into that people are doing all over the internet, making great food, and nothing connects you with food more than just getting in the kitchen and putting together that little frittata for lunch. And Italian food is most suited for everyday cooking of any of the great cuisines, I think. So we have pasta for lunch every day, and of course the wine. So many people are doing Zoom cocktail hours with their friends, and so many vineyards are doing virtual tastings online. There are lots of ways you can keep in touch. Of course, nothing is like being there, but there are lots of little touchstones to have fun with during this time. I just hope coming out of this time, we all emerge a little bit better than when we went in. If we're lucky enough to escape the virus and stay healthy, I try to think time is always what we're wanting. Time. And now some of us have time, and I don't think it's good to really complain about it, because make the most of it.
Those are some really
I'm doing just a lot of reading. It's just a great pleasure.
excellent suggestions. Read, plan, eat, and drink. I think we pretty much covered everything that is good in life. So I agree also with what you were saying about hoping to come out of this better. And I know everybody is changed by this. I myself have. I think I've slowed down a little bit, and it's very positive, and I think I'm more attuned to what's around me. Certainly the way we travel has to change and will change. How do you think that travelers in this next phase are going to approach Italy?
We'll just have to see. I don't think we know yet how soon we can be what we used to call normal, but now there's going to be a new normal for quite a while. And I read yesterday, I don't know whether it's true, that if you live in Tuscany this summer, you cannot leave the region. Fortunately, Tuscany is full of earthly delights, so that's not such a big hardship. But for someone planning to travel late summer, we don't know. We just don't know whether we can. Or I have my ticket for September 28th, and I'm hoping I get to go. If I could go sooner, I would. But I think we just really don't know. There's such an urge for everybody to get back to normal, but, we shouldn't yet. We shouldn't.
Yeah, indeed. We need to stay safe and stay away as much as possible. And if that means not being here, I mean, we don't know at all if we're going to be able to move out of the region or not. So there's certainly no official news on that. And the government is definitely making its decisions based on a lot of statistics. So we are going to trust them. And certainly us, we are really lucky that we're here in Italy, in Tuscany, where anyway.
I'm incredibly proud of how Italy has handled this crisis. And there was an article a few days ago in the New York Times opinion by Beppe Severgnini on that subject. He was proud of Italy and said why. Look up the article. I put it on my Facebook. I thought it was really grace under pressure. That's what Italy has shown. I know some people haven't behaved, but most have. And there hasn't been this kind of partisan uprising over the virus, which is so incredibly stupid, that we're experiencing here. But I think Italy hit harder than is imaginable. But they've handled it so well.
Mm-hmm. No, we certainly are, changed, and the economic implications are still to be calculated. But one thing we really do appreciate is the kind of positivity that you help give about Italy and about Tuscany, and the way that you encourage people to travel here. And I think a lot of our viewers don't need encouragement at all. I know that everybody's really aching to be back here and to be back to loving Italy. So I would close up just by encouraging everyone to buy Frances's latest book, Always Italy. I'd love to get my hands on the hardcover at this point too, because I think it's really going to be one to have, and one for any coffee table, especially in the United States, to look at and to think and to use it to plan your next trip. So any other closing words?
I will definitely get you a copy because I want one in your hands.
Thank you.
Alexandra, you're just fantastic, and thank you so much for inviting me onto the Florentine.
You're too kind, and thank you on behalf of the Florentine, the whole staff behind this transmission as well, and from Helen and Marco and Jane. Thanks again for being with us.
Ci vediamo subito.
Ci vediamo. Ciao.
Ciao.